the quiet rustle of old letters forgotten in a desk drawer, faded ink hiding secrets of the past. Sometimes a single letter can change everything. Welcome to Echoes of the Past. When I found these letters, I thought they were just a forgotten story from the past. Old, yellowed envelopes filled with shaky handwriting left in a drawer at a nursing home. But as soon as I read the first letter, I realized these words held a truth that was never meant to be known. This man lost everything: his family, his name, his home. He was betrayed by those he loved most. He vanished from the lives of his loved ones as if he had never existed. And now, as his memory fades, only these letters keep his story from being lost forever. My name is Ava Reeves, and this is the story that changed my life. The first time I saw him, he was sitting by the window, staring outside with a vacant expression. The other residents of the nursing home ignored him, and the staff barely acknowledged his presence. He was just another forgotten soul, lost in the passage of time. I introduced myself, but he only looked at me with weary, clouded eyes. It wasn't until I mentioned my work, my YouTube channel dedicated to uncovering forgotten stories, that he seemed to awaken from his trance. You tell stories?" His voice was hoarse, as if unused for years. I nodded. "I try to preserve the ones that shouldn't be lost." His gaze shifted, thoughtful, conflicted. Then, after a long silence, he whispered, "There's something you should read." He led me to a small wooden drawer and retrieved a stack of letters, tied together with a frayed ribbon. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but as I held them, I felt the weight of something heavy, something painful. "Read them," he said, "and then decide if this story deserves to be remembered." That night, I sat at my desk, a dim lamp casting shadows across my hands as I carefully unfolded the first letter. The ink had smudged in places, as though tears had fallen on the page long ago. His words carried a desperation that felt as alive as the moment they had been written. As I read, I realized these were not just letters. They were fragments of a man's shattered life, each one exposing a deeper tragedy. My heartbeat quickened. If what he had written was true, then the world had forgotten a grave injustice. I looked at the old man's name, signed at the bottom of each letter. A name no one remembered. A name I was determined to uncover. That night, I barely slept. The letters were filled with desperate pleas for justice, messages he had written over the years but never sent. Letters meant for a son who had been taught to hate him. Letters for a wife who had mourned him as if he were dead. My dearest Eleanor, I do not know if you will ever read this, but if you do, know that I have never stopped loving you. I have never stopped searching for the truth. Each page carried the same raw emotion, an outcry from a man who had lost everything. He had been a journalist, respected, loved. He had a home, a family, a life. Until one fateful day, an accusation shattered it all. The details were chilling. A crime he did not commit. A trial where the verdict had been decided before the first witness spoke. A world that turned its back on him. The worst part was that his family had been made to believe the lies. His wife, his son, all convinced he was guilty. I gripped the last letter, my pulse pounding in my ears. The injustice of it burned inside me. I needed to know more. Who had done this to him? And why had he remained silent all these years? As the sun rose outside my window, I made a decision. I would go back to him. I would get the rest of the story, no matter what it took. The next morning, I returned to the nursing home, clutching the letters in my hands. The old man was sitting in the same spot, staring out the window as if waiting for me. "Did you read them?" he asked softly, without turning. I sat down across from him. Yes, I said, but I need to know everything. His hands trembled slightly as he set down his cup of tea. I was a fool to trust the wrong people, he murmured, and I paid the price. Piece by piece, he told me the rest. Decades ago, he had uncovered corruption in powerful circles. One day, he got too close to something dangerous. The people he had exposed decided to silence him by fabricating evidence against him. His wife was told he was guilty. His son grew up believing his father was a monster. By the time the truth emerged, it was too late. His wife had remarried. His son had built a life without him. Even when his name was cleared, no one wanted to look back. They had already mourned him. A ghost had no place among the living. His voice broke as he spoke his final words. I could have screamed my innocence. I could have fought harder, but in the end, I was too tired. His frail hands gripped the armrests of his chair. I had no fight left in me. I stayed with him for hours, listening to the stories he had never told anyone else. He spoke of love, of dreams lost, of regrets that haunted him. As the sun set, he reached out and placed a hand over mine. "Thank you," he whispered, "for listening." That night, I sat alone with his letters, knowing that his story could no longer remain buried. I had to tell the world the truth, and I wouldn't let it be forgotten. I spent days researching his past, digging into archives, tracking down old records. I found the original case, the articles that condemned him. But I also found something else, the retraction, the quiet admission of error, buried in the back pages of a newspaper years later. A truth whispered, when the lie had already screamed. His son, now a grown man, had never seen it. His wife had passed away believing a lie. The weight of it all crushed me. I had to do something. I had to tell this story, not just to honor him, but to correct the wrongs that had been left to fester in silence. I turned on my camera, the letters spread before me, and pressed record. This is the story of a man the world forgot, but I refused to let him disappear. When I returned to the nursing home, his room was empty. "He passed away last night," the nurse said softly, "fell asleep and never woke up." I looked at the bed, at the table where the letters once lay. On the windowsill only one remained, addressed to me. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. "Ava, thank you for listening to me. If you're reading this, then I am gone. But now the truth will not die with me. You know what to do. Goodbye." A strange emptiness filled me. I had found the story, but lost the man who could have told it to the end. A few days passed before I saw Marcus again. He stood on my doorstep, impeccably dressed, but there was exhaustion in his eyes. "Is he dead?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "Now you know everything," he said. "No." I held out the final letter. "He wanted you to know. Marcus didn't take the envelope. It won't change anything. Don't you want to read it?" He shook his head. "I've lived with this story all my life. I can't change it. But you will have to live with it now." He turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the letter that was never opened. I watched him go, realizing that sometimes the truth is known to all, but no one wants to accept it. Later, I uploaded a video to my channel. It wasn't an expose or a sensational revelation. It was the story of a man who had been betrayed, but who still found a way to leave the truth behind. There weren't many comments. People debated, accused, tried to understand who was right. But I knew one thing. His story would not disappear now. It would remain, just like his letters. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more captivating tales.